you're having a hard time getting your beats to not sound as boring and repetitive, today I'm going to cover 4 tips that can help you out. A lot of times when making beats, producers will create their basic loop and from there move on to arranging. Then by the end of the whole process, they wonder why their beats sound so boring. But if you do this one additional step after you make your basic loop, but before you start arranging, it can help you with this problem of your beat sounding repetitive. The basic idea is to extend your loop, make your loop sound more dynamic for longer, and you can do this at least 4 different ways. Let me show you this with an actual example though. Let's say I was just starting a beat and this was the first layer that I chose to use. Now I am making things extra hard for myself here. This is the type of pattern that can easily lead to a boring, repetitive beat. Fundamentally, all we have here is a half bar loop, and it's just playing the exact same 2 chords over and over again. So let's start building out our beat here by adding a drum and bass pattern around this loop here. Now this might be the stage of your beat making process where you think to yourself, all right, I have my basic idea built here. This sounds like a beat to me, so let's start to move on to arranging. But this can easily lead to a very boring beat by the end. Let's take an additional step of extending our loop out here. As of right now, after I glued these patterns together, we basically have a 1 bar loop repeating 4 times. Let's figure out a way to introduce enough variation to the point where it now starts to feel like an actual 4 bar loop. So tip number 1 is to create variation using your rhythms. This is something that I see very often, and it's even something that I'm guilty of at times. It's really easy to just create your basic drum pattern and leave it as it is after you built out your core idea. But instead, if we take our rhythmic sections of our beat and we start to create something that changes over a longer period of time, this will start to help this loop sound more engaging and interesting over time as well. So for example, let's take this hi-hat pattern right here and create some variations so different things start to happen over the span of this 4 bar loop. All right, so you can see I added some variation here, for example, at the end of the 2nd bar right here. And also at the end of the 4th bar. Just small little rhythmic shifts here. Let's take our 808 pattern and do something similar. I'm just going to take some of these notes and move them so it's not just a simple 1 bar loop repeating over and over again. I'm going to do the exact same thing with my kick pattern as well. So you can see overall now each bar has some small little variation within it. So you can start to hear this is helping us a tiny bit in creating something that feels a little bit more dynamic over this longer period of time. They're not huge changes by any means, but they are changes that will compound over time, as you will see by the end of this video. Another thing that we can do is play around with the melodies of our beats so the exact same thing isn't happening over and over again. As of right now, there isn't much going on with the melodic components of this beat, and like I mentioned, I wanted to keep that piano loop as it is to make things harder for myself. So I'm going to play with the music of my 808 pattern. I'm going to add in some extra notes and some slides in order to introduce some melodic variation. That way the exact same thing isn't happening over and over again. I'm also going to play around with the pitch of my hi-hats as well. So here I introduced a little bit more musicality using my hi-hats as well, so you can hear the difference. So again, a small change here, but as we add more and more of these tips and ideas into our beat, the changes will start to mount and feel more and more substantial. Tip number 3 is to add in more instrumentation, but this does come with a caveat. One of the things that I see producers do is that they'll add more instrumentation into their beat and come up with a melody where it basically just becomes yet another repetitive loop built on top of their already repetitive loop. Meaning, if the issue with your beat currently is that it's too repetitive and all you do is add in yet another instrument that also behaves as a repetitive loop, this might not be the best way to solve your problem. So in this example, adding in new instrumentation and having it play for the entire 4 bars might not serve me well. Here it might be a wiser choice to pick and choose different parts of the beat where new instrumentation comes in and out. So for instance, let's say I add in this new sound right here. And when it comes time to create a new layer, what I'm going to do here is pick and choose when to actually use this sound. here we have sections of this loop where this sound is and isn't playing, which is helping it sound more interesting. I'll do the exact same thing with yet a few more layers. Basically, as you can see, I chose to use a bunch of different smaller sounds to play throughout the beat as a means of creating a more robust amount of variation, rather than just use one sound that constantly plays throughout the entire loop. So a different approach here that you can consider thinking about when it comes time to adding more into your beat. Another means of creating variation over a longer period of time is to use automations and events with your effects. Whether that be something simple like playing around with the panning of your sounds over your longer loop, as you can see here, or playing around with different effects and turning them on and off during your loop. Here I've done that somewhat manually. I duplicated my piano loop and just played this one single note here. But as you can hear, I added some delay on top of it, so we get that effect essentially playing for just this one first section of the entire loop. So now, after all these small little adjustments and variations that I have included, we can start to hear that this beat will just not sound as repetitive over the duration of an entire beat. Essentially, I've taken my loop that initially lasted just 1 bar and I tried my best to make it last 4 bars, but do so in an interesting way. If you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Head over to betterbeatmaker.com if you're interested in joining my full online beatmaking course. My free drum kit's available in the description box below, as well as a link to the Discord if you want to join my producer community, and I'll see you guys next time.